the Rust programming language is right now one of the biggest threats to our technological space. And it is a little bit of a weird situation because we are used to having a clear enemy. We're used to just seeing Windows and Mac and seeing, okay, this is the corporation, these are the guys that actually want to harm us, these are the guys that we need to stay away from. And free software was meant to be the alternative to corporate. But of course, free software won, but corporate is not going to leave that be that easily. So they are trying to take advantage of that. They are trying to take advantage through forcing people to contribute to free software in order to, get jobs in the first place. And as a result, a lot of people that are not interested at all in the philosophy get into this space. And that just makes it very easy for other sort of agents to take advantage of us. And Rust is a cloak. Rust is effectively a cloak. It is a monopoly that is trying to take over as much technological space as it possibly can in order to have control over it. There is only one compiler for Rust, and there will always be only one compiler for Rust, because it's an incredibly complex language that nobody can replace. Simply because of that. It's like, yes, you could technically create another modern browser, but realistically, you're not going to do that. You're going to need thousands and thousands of contributors and a very long time of just working on that. Not to mention that Rust is constantly changing. And so creating a compiler for it will require a lot of work and a lot of persistence. And it only has one source repository for the libraries. So it's a monopoly, effectively. And that's the first point. The first point is that it's irreplaceable. And by taking up more and more space where it shouldn't be, like low-level code, because Rust is not a low-level language, it's a high-level language. We don't know what it's doing there. But the point is that it's there. And it is ridiculous to have Rust in places like kernels, because Rust does not support a lot of the architectures that we see. Rust only supports mainstream architectures instead of, what C supports, which C has a lot better compatibility overall than Rust. This is the reason C has always been the go-to language for systems programming. It's because it's incredibly easy to create a compiler for C, and it's incredibly easy to port it to all sorts of places. That's the point of C. That's realistically that's what it is, and that's what it was supposed to do. And on the other hand, for Rust it's incredibly hard to port to different architectures. And so we see that just by rewriting the kernel in this language, then there are architectures that are already obsolete. Not naturally obsolete, but artificially obsolete. Because it just so happens that the people behind the Rust compiler didn't want to support that architecture. And that same thing goes for many programs that are simply not able to run in certain spaces, which in itself, it's not entirely bad. I mean, it is bad, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. The problem, however, is that even if you wanted to change that, you will not be able to, because there is only one compiler that is being maintained by one organization, and it's ridiculous to think that you could have any effect on that just because of how complex the language is. And now the government is paying different entities to rewrite software in Rust and all of that. And obviously there is a lot of propaganda for Rust. Google is one of the main ones bringing that in. Which, by the way, we all know that corporations are bad. So when we see a corporation doing something evil, we know corporations tend to have evil behavior. So when we see corporations building something like this, can we not immediately spot it? I'm very skeptic of anything that Google does. In fact, I was very skeptic of Go, but it just so happens that Go is such a great language and so decentralized and stable that there is no way it can get corrupted. Unlike, there we go again, Rust. And just for you to realize the complexity of Rust, I'm going to open a program that I have over here. It's called Twisty Pillar. It has 200 lines of code, and the only library it uses, I believe, it is a direct interface between most display managers and the program. It's a pixel buffer. Very simple library. But if you take a look at the space, for some reason, the cache is half a gigabyte for a 200 line of code program. So I could obviously just remove all the cache and reinstall things once again. And you will see that first of all, it takes a lot to compile. So you also, in order to develop in Rust, you also need a powerful computer. It's not like C anymore, which anyone can compile. Now the compile times are just infinitely longer. And once you get that done, you see it's actually a very stupid program. There is no reason for it to be this incredibly large. And now we take a look at the size again, and you can see 600 megabytes. Again, just like that. So, yeah, the point is, it's a monopoly. The people behind it can do whatever they want with it at any time. And obviously there are laws to be able to hijack any program, being able to add vulnerabilities to them, and not allowing the developers to tell to anyone, which I suppose is the objective behind Rust. If everyone depends on Rust, the government can choose what hardware is allowed and what... And if they want to add a vulnerability to it in order to spy the people using it, they can get to spy to the vast majority of people using free software. And I believe that's the point behind it all. But even if it wasn't, we can clearly see that this is sort of damaging to the whole free software ecosystem, especially considering that how hard it is to port something this big. On the other hand, we can see other alternatives like OpenBSD. Alternative to Linux like OpenBSD, which supports lots of older hardware as well. And in the case that... Alright, sorry, I'm missing some context here. Linux is getting larger and larger every time, and now that they included Rust and everything, it's just getting incredibly complex. And the thing is that all software will eventually bloat and die. It is inevitable. If you keep adding lines of code to it, you will eventually get so big that it will just be unsustainable. That's why Terry Davis set a limit, a size limit to his own software, to his own operative system. Do not make it too big. Do not bloat it too much. Do not make it go through the same end that Linux has gone. And whenever the Linux boat sinks, we're going to have to jump somewhere else. So that's why I'm giving other options. There's OpenBSD, which is fine. It's basically like Linux, but if it was well done. But obviously it has compatibility with everything that Linux has compatibility with. So it is large. The whole system has to be large. Not the core utilities, but the way you use it will eventually lead to that. Then there's also Haiku, which is another operative system. Works well, works fine, but it is, again, incredibly bloated. And then there's obviously Ninefront, which it's not as much as a user-friendly software, but in the case that everything goes to shit, we still have this one available, which we should always have alternatives in mind. I believe we shouldn't close the door to that idea. And the point is that C programs can be easily ported anywhere. They can work in Haiku, they can work in OpenBSD, they can work in Ninefront. But Rust programs are a little harder to port. You need specific architectures. You often need GPU for some reason. And you can, of course, not port Rust to Ninefront. In fact, it's easier to port Ninefront to Rust than porting Rust to Ninefront. That's how complex it is. And so, alright, so enough talk. I actually wanted to do something about all of this. So there is a tool that I use a lot. It's called Zoxite. You probably know it. And I developed my own. I developed my own version of Zoxite. So in fact, if I go to my bashrc file, you will see that this is not, that I'm using Noxite, not Zoxite. So if I press Noxite, if I write Noxite in it, I get the hook. It's just incredibly simple. And as you can see, the thing that I'm using right now is not Zoxite, it's Noxite. It's my own version of it. And it effectively does the same as Zoxite. It's just that it's written in C. It's not smart. I honestly didn't care. I didn't even know Zoxite was tracking how many times you opened certain directories to optimize things. And I honestly don't care now. So it's just going to teleport you to your oldest result. And that's fine. That's fine with me. It just makes it faster. Also, it is an incredibly small program. It's below 200 lines of code. So, I will say it's a success. I don't really need Zoxite anymore, and I was highly dependent on it. So, there's a little less Rust in my system now. Just a little less. But the point is to eventually remove it all. And that's why I'm going to start rewriting a lot of things, a lot of Rust programs into simplified versions, just so in the case you're dependent on one of them, you at least have a shitty alternative that doesn't require Rust. And that's what I'm going to start doing. I'm also going to eventually move to another system that, again, does not require Rust. Probably OpenBSD or FreeBSD at first, but I would also like to see Plan 9 being usable, so I might just work on that, try to make some programs to help the usability of Plan 9, which I am not very smart, I know, and people working on Plan 9 are incredibly smart. But I believe I can, give something to the project, contribute in some way. So that's it. I'm declaring war on Rust. Kind of. Well, I just don't like Rust. And I am going to keep spreading the word. I might eventually open up my own Git, so to speak. Because, GitHub kind of sucks, and they are actively trying to replace developers by machines, which is just... It's fantastic. We love to see the number one developer platform advocating for the replacement of developers. And so I want to remove GitHub from the things that I use. I also heard about SourceHut, but it doesn't convince me completely. It is better, but just in case, I will keep my distance from it and just create my own Git. It's not that hard, really. Creating your own sort of GitHub is a relatively simple task that I believe I can get done in not that much time. And in there, I could get some sort of topic about rewriting Rust software in C. And so if you're interested, I may eventually make a video talking about it, just showcasing it when I have it. So yeah, that's it. That's what I had to say. And in the case you're not convinced by my anti-Rust rhetoric just yet, just keep in mind that programming in Rust is gay.